Tonight's guest has a story, and like most of our stories, it's not at all a straight line. But it's where he is today, where God has led him, how he's learned to speak truth with love and understanding that makes his life so compelling. We'll talk to Pastor Dave Biser about what God has done in his life and ministry. It's a great story, and it's all true. Stay with us. Tonight's guest, Pastor Dave Biser of Crosspoint Church, leads a full life. He's a husband, father of 3 adult children, the vision pastor for a thriving church, a historian, and an author. And he also, from time to time, gets into movies. And get this, as a United States Marine, he's the chaplain for something called Veterans Court, a program within the judicial system for incarcerated persons who have served in uniform. Dave, welcome to State of Independence. Great to have you. Let's start with the most important question first. How, when, and where did Jesus find you?
Wow, what a place to start. Thank you for having me here, Joe. I really appreciate it. This is an honor for me. I can't tell you how much I appreciate this. Jesus found me when I was growing up, whether it was through Sunday morning church or whether it was through church camps growing up. I over and over again, I would constantly commit my life or recommit my life to him through those engagements of being in church or with church groups or church folk. So I always grew up connected. And then one day, this lady who lived across the street, she just looked at me and she said, "You would make a great pastor." And I thought, no way. I can't do that. I don't want to do, no, I don't know. No, I don't want to do that.
So tell me about your childhood then. I mean, that somebody would think that you'd be a great pastor is a real compliment. So were you like where'd you grow up first? And then were you like some kind of a model child that somebody would think, like that guy ought to be a pastor?
So I was born in Hagerstown, Maryland, grew up in Greencastle, Pennsylvania for the first half of my childhood. My dad got work at 3 Mile Island, and so we moved from Greencastle, Pennsylvania, up to Camp Hill, Pennsylvania. And so I finished my school, as a child, I finished my schooling there in Camp Hill. And then, I was that kid who I had a paper route. I was in the band, marching band. I had, I mowed lawns and shoveled sidewalks. I had a work ethic that came from my parents who both worked hard. I had this I love people. I'm the middle child, so I have an older brother and a younger brother, and so I didn't have any of those responsibilities of being in charge of everything as the older brother and being the baby of the family as the younger brother. So I was out every day. I was one of those kids where mom would say, yeah, I get on my bike in the morning, and she'd say, "Be back for supper," and I just loved the fullness of life as much as I could grab it. So I think that gregariousness put me in that light for this lady. And I'd mow her lawn and I'd shovel her walk, and she wanted to give me money for it, and I just, no, please no. I'm not doing it for that reason. And I think there was something about her and about our relationship, but there was a connection there, and I think she felt it. And I think because of that, her sense was there's more to this story. There's more to this young kid, right? And she saw potential in me. I think that's one of the things maybe that God gave her that picture, that God allowed her to see that in me, and then God prompted her to call it out in me.
Well, she saw that you didn't charge her either, so she figured,
right? Yeah.
Maybe ministry was right for you,
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Did you go to college after high school? What'd you do?
So right out of high school. So here's how this story goes. Joe, thank you for asking. So she put that in my heart and put that in my mind and put that in my ears, and God started playing with it. I did not know any pastors that I emulated, that I thought I really want to grow up to be like that. And so I thought ministry was not for me. So my first response to that, what I would call a call to ministry, was to run in the opposite direction, like Jonah. I thought, okay, I'm going the opposite direction. How far away from God can I get? Because I don't want to be a pastor. And so I thought, military service, and then I thought the Marine Corps, because I had always heard that the Marines were the baddest and the worst, and those are the guys that are in first, and yeah. So I thought, God certainly isn't there, right? God is not in the Marine Corps, so I'll go to the Marine Corps, and that'll be my Tarshish, my opposite of Nineveh, right? I'll just run in the opposite direction. My first week into boot camp, the drill instructor called me out and made me the lay leader of my platoon. He didn't
What?
know me from Adam, didn't know me from anybody else in the
What?
room, but he called me out and said, you're going to be the lay leader of this platoon. And I didn't know what that meant, but I knew it. I knew the terminology, right? I knew the terminology of lay leader. The next thing I know, I'm sitting on bedsides with guys who are getting Dear John letters. The drill instructor's like, "Don't come to me, go see the lay leader." And here I am counseling guys my age who are going through stuff, and I didn't realize that God was saying to me then, "You can run, but you can't hide from me. I've got you. I've built you for this. I created you for this. This is what I want you to be." So 4 years in the Marine Corps, got out, did a bunch of stuff, post-military service, did a lot of restaurant equipment work and that kind of stuff, and really just spun my wheels for a while. About 5 years after doing that, I looked at my wife and I said, I think it's time for me to surrender. I think it's time for me to give up and give in to what God has called me to do. And I had heard an audible call to ministry, and I needed to answer it. And I remember going to my God love my parents. They're still alive, and my dad's 90, my mom's 89. I remember going to my mom and I said, "Mom, I'm going to become a pastor." And she said, "Well, it's about time."
Wow.
So other people saw it in me, Joe. I
Yeah.
didn't see it in myself,
Yeah.
because I just didn't see myself being that guy. I knew a pastor who mowed his lawn with a tie on, and I was like, I can't do that. I don't want to be that. How am I going to be? So I clearly heard God call me to be me and to be a pastor at the same time, not to be something I wasn't. And so that made me feel a whole lot better. Maybe it made me feel like this was going to be a unique call to ministry, and I was going to be able to be me.
How'd you get to
And
Crosspoint Church?
that changed everything. I got to Crosspoint Church, get this, 27 years ago as the youth pastor, the young adult pastor, the contemporary worship guy. When contemporary worship was starting to break out, the senior pastor there knew me, and I was pastoring a church up in Juniata County here in the middle of the state of Pennsylvania. And I had been there for 8 years. I had doubled the size of those two congregations in that area. And he saw what was going on. And he said, "This is the guy I want. I want this guy to come here and do that kind of thing here at Crosspoint." So I stepped into that role as the associate pastor. And then he tragically passed away about 10 years into that run. And they moved me up into the vision pastor position, the senior pastor position.
Wow. My God. How old were you when you got that job?
Oh my gosh, I was in my mid 30s, and three young kids, and um, I still wasn't quite sure how this was all going to work. But what I did know is that I had this incredible sense of peace about answering the call to ministry. I knew God had me. Didn't have college, so I had to go to college. I went to Messiah College here in Central PA, Messiah University. And then I went to Eastern Seminary, which is now Palmer Seminary down in Philadelphia. So I commuted back and forth every week, and I had none of that. Did military service instead. So had to do college, had to do seminary. Thank God for churches who were willing to love a young guy who was figuring it out.
Well, God has gifted you to have all these different talents because, you're not just an ex-Marine, you're not just a pastor, but, you're an author. You've even been in some movies, which is really cool.
Yeah,
Like, tell me the movies
true.
you've been in.
So, I've gotten some really unique opportunities. Most of the things that I get a chance to be in are history related. And so, primarily because of my love of colonial time period history, I've had a chance to slide in as an extra in some really neat opportunities. So, public television has a couple segments out, called one called Liberty. The American Experience did a thing on John Adams and Abigail Adams. I play an active role in that. In local here in the Harrisburg area, public television did a thing on the 9 months that Congress spent in York, Pennsylvania, and so I got a chance to be in that. And then probably the biggest event was being in the HBO's John Adams. I got a chance to be in the background in that as an extra. So that was kind of fun. When historians and reenactors show up on a movie set, we come fully dressed, so they don't have to outfit us or anything. They love us.
Yeah.
Like we come more decked out than they could ever imagine, and so they love it. They just put a call out for historical reenactors, and we all show up ready to go.
And it's so cool. So your love of history has gotten you to actually even write a book. I mean, aren't you like a serious student of the founder of Harrisburg?
Yeah, I stumbled into that as a reenactor. The Dauphin County Historical Society was looking for somebody to pick up the gauntlet and run some history on this guy who founded the city of Harrisburg. Nobody had done it before, and so I dove into it. Unwillingly at first, because I thought, I don't want to be a part of a dog and pony show. I don't, I'm not an actor. I didn't want to really do that. But I was really interested in the idea of first-person portrayal, to really get to know this guy and portray him in for lack of better terminology, in theatrical styles, and in presentations where I could really present history. One of my favorite places to go is Colonial Williamsburg, and that's one of the things they do there. They have a lot of first-person interpretation, and so I took my cues from those guys, went down and spent some time really honing the craft from people that I truly honor and value in my life, and then have been able to do a first-person presentation of John Harris Jr., the founder of the city of Harrisburg.
Wow, I mean, that's
been a lot of fun.
And not a well-known name.
No.
I mean, that's a story that I think few people know, even in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Is that right?
Right. That's very true. He is what we would call a second-tier patriot. So the first tier is Ben Franklin and George Washington and John Adams and Thomas Jefferson. That's all everybody knows those names. Everybody knows Alexander Hamilton. Everybody knows, so there's a whole list of first-tier patriots who make America what it is today in that founding era. But there's a whole layer of second-tier patriots around the United States, up and down the East Coast, who in those 13 colonies, who really take the idea of being patriot and move it to the next level. And they're doing a lot of the groundwork. They're doing a lot of the implementation of the things that are happening in Philadelphia, whether it's through the Declaration of Independence or the things that are being decided in Philadelphia. Those things all have to be implemented into the countryside and into the lives of people. And so it takes key individuals like a John Harris, who moves out here. His father moves out here to the Susquehanna River, sets up home. He's born on the Susquehanna River area, and he establishes homestead there. He takes over all of his father's businesses and everything when his father passes away. And he really does establish the city of Harrisburg. And his goal is to establish a city that would rival Philadelphia, because his hope is eventually that the government would move from Philadelphia and move west, and he wanted to have a place where that was possible. And so he wanted to design the city of Harrisburg to become the place government would eventually move west to. They had done so up in New York. They had moved out to Albany, and in Virginia, they had moved from Williamsburg out to Richmond. So he saw what was coming, and he thought, if we can make a city here on the Susquehanna River that government can come to eventually, I want that to be Harrisburg. And eventually that would be the case.
Wow, that's such a neat story. I mean,
it is.
These founding fathers were like such visionaries. And while they were extraordinary people, they were also very human, and they had the same human frailties that human beings have always had. Yeah, so I'm guessing that the great John Harris may have also been a slaveholder, like so many of the founding fathers were, despite the fact that he was doing great stuff and had such a great vision to create this a city like Philadelphia that would be a seat of government, as it has become, a great seat of government. That's probably true?
Yes, Joe, it is true. He is an owner of 6 people. So he has enslaved people there at his home. His father was also owned people. Probably one of the most famous slaves in his time period was Hercules, an individual who helped his father be released from captivity from natives and watched over John Harris Sr. quite closely, and who would eventually get his freedom given to him, Hercules. And I think he is a stand-up individual in the enslaved community for the colonial time period, and he's a model in many ways of how to live in such a way to be free, even when you're enslaved, which
Wow.
was an incredible thought process. John Harris does own 6 people, and what we discover in that process is, in studying him, is what I found is I don't know what I don't know. Right? I can't go back and feel what he feels, understand the institution of slavery the way it was lived out every single day. But what I know in reading through his life, he is a part of the 1780 Manumission Act in the state of Pennsylvania. He's a part of the Pennsylvania Assembly when the Great Manumission Act of 1780 is written, where the first colony, the first state of all 13 states, to have a gradual release of all enslaved people, no matter who they were, in the state of Pennsylvania, and we're the first state to do that, which I think we should celebrate as a state, by the way. I think we should be celebrating the Manumission Act of 1780. He's a part of writing that act. And so he has a conscience, he has a heart here. And that heart then would come out in 1791 when he writes his last will and testament. He sets aside all the funds needed and necessary to have each one of his enslaved people released into freedom. One is going to be released immediately upon his death. The other 5 are going to be released gradually, overseen by his children, so that they would have a fruitful and prosperous life. And so he makes sure that everyone that he is responsible to and responsible for has a good life to live once he's gone.
Wow, wow. Now, God is using you in other ways besides being a pastor and an author. You're, as an ex-Marine, you sit on a board that I guess dispenses justice. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. We sit in a courtroom every Friday and hear the reports of individuals who are in the Dauphin County Veterans Court. Veterans Court is found in many of the counties here in the state of Pennsylvania and many other places around the United States. This is a relatively short-lived wave. It's been within the last 20 years that a specialized thing called Veterans Court has existed. And it's an opportunity for us to take veterans who have been caught up in the penal system, in the correctional system in some way, which means they did something wrong, right? And because they did something wrong, and because they're a veteran, we wanted to make sure that they have a second chance that they deserve. Every veteran who steps into veterans court has a reason for them being there that's connected in some way to their military service, whether it's PTSD, whether it's substance abuse, whatever it may be. They have some connection that caused them to go down a bad route and to go dark in some way. It could be that they got caught drunk driving. It means that they could have gotten caught buying drugs that they shouldn't have had because they ran out of the ones that they needed or felt like they needed. They could have done harm in some way to somebody else because they didn't know how to act or react to the feelings that they were having when placed in a certain circumstance. And so they've been put into this court system. They voluntarily step in, but once they step in, then they're required to maintain some pretty rigid sets of rules in order to work their way through so that they can become the upstanding citizen that they were when they were wearing that uniform. That's the goal.
We're with Pastor Dave Biser. He's many things, including an author. Dave is out with a new book about one of Pennsylvania's unsung historical figures, John Harris Jr., the founder of Harrisburg. Don't go away.
Learn more about Joe Watkins and the mission of this program at joewatkins.net. And tell Joe what you thought about today's program in the comment box. Share what you've learned on today's program by first connecting with Joe directly on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Get started at joewatkins.net.
If you're enjoying this conversation with Pastor Dave Biser, you can follow him on Facebook for his daily devotionals or visit xpointumc.org. That's for Crosspoint Church, of course. Pastor Dave, if I visit Harrisburg on the 4th of July, you do something pretty special to commemorate America's birthday. Tell us about your reading of the Declaration of Independence.
Oh, I love it. It's one of the highlights of my year. When I was doing the research on John Harrison, I was digging in deep. One of the things I discovered about him is that this Continental Congress had asked for the Declaration of Independence to be read publicly in every venue possible. George Washington has it read out loud in front of his troops. It's read from pulpits and churches. And John Harris takes that directive very clearly and very personally as the guy who is the leader of the community here at what is then known as Harris's Ferry. And so he invites everyone to his house, and he stands up on his front porch and reads out loud the entirety of the Declaration of Independence from start to bottom. Because he wants everyone to hear this document, hear what has been signed off and written about in Philadelphia, and it is now the new law of the land. He's quite proud of it. At first, he's hesitant, he's skeptical. His parents are both born in Yorkshire, England, so he's a good Englishman living here in the colonies, and he doesn't see a problem with it. But then once he turns patriot, he is all in. He puts 3,000 pounds of his own cash into the military effort. He rides down to Philadelphia and delivers it to Congress himself, and then stands on his front porch and reads that declaration to every single citizen who would come and listen to it. And so we decided every year we will reenact that reading, and we get a crowd every year on the 4th of July to hear the reading. And many of those people say they had never heard it read in its entirety before.
That is so cool, so incredibly cool. Yeah. Now, tell me quickly about your church, the makeup of Crosspoint Church. Where you're located and who are your members.
Sure. Yeah, we're on the suburbs, on the eastern suburbs, outside, just a little outside the city limits of the city of Harrisburg. We are what we would constitute as a medium-sized church. So that means we have all the ministries and all the things going on that you would want. It's a contemporary, more modern style of worship. So we're not opening a hymn book. We're singing upbeat songs off of the screens with a live band. 2 services every Sunday with several hundred people in person and online that just get excited about what we're doing. We also we have launched a couple churches here in the Harrisburg area, and we've also maintained a sister congregation in Sierra Leone, West Africa, which I get a chance to go over and be a part of that congregation in West Africa as well. That's just a whole story unto itself right there, to be quite honest.
Yeah, that is very, very cool. I can't imagine, having a chance to go over and to share the good news of the gospel overseas, along with the work that you've got in Harrisburg. What a great blessing. Thanks so much for being our guest today, Pastor Dave. It was just a joy to talk with you.
I'm honored and privileged, Joe. Thank you so much for having me on today.
You're welcome, brother. Well, Dave's book is called Visionary Road to the Capitol, The Untold Until Now, Story of an Extraordinary Man Named John Harris Jr. I'll be back to wrap it up with our great producer, Jeff Coleman, so stay with us.
You're watching Joe Watkins' State of Independence on Lighthouse TV. Positively different. Share your comments about today's program in the comment box at joewatkins.org. Learn more about Joe Watkins and the mission of this program at joewatkins.net. And tell Joe what you thought about today's program in the comment box.
And now let's talk to our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
Well, Dave Biser is a person who lives this notion of saying yes to whatever God puts in front of you. And obviously there was a point, as he described, as a Nineveh moment, where he wasn't saying yes. And then God continues to put people in his life, and eventually he says yes. And then from that point on, every day of his life is different, as it has been for you and for me. Yeah. Where you're on a movie set one day, and the next day you're having a conversation in front of people, maybe in a church setting, or on a subway or on a bus, always being willing and able to say yes. And I think that's where God wants to take every Christian or Christ follower, no matter how old or young you are. So if you're 90 and watching this, or if you're 15 watching this, it's the same thing. Just say yes. And life is a lot more interesting, I think.
It sure is. I was afraid he was going to say when he said he had a Jonah moment that he got swallowed by a big fish. You know,
Yeah.
He said, I was out in the ocean and I got swallowed. But
Because God has a lot of equivalents of big fishes
Yeah.
for us.
Yeah.
A lot of what feel like detours, wilderness years. A lot of people in leadership describe wilderness years of not feeling like they're relevant or in the game. I think a lot of people who are living alone after a spouse has died think of themselves as being in this holding pattern, but opening your eyes and saying, wait a second, there's a neighbor next door, there's someone who's trying to sell me something at the door. Maybe instead of saying, I can't talk to you, you say yes to that assignment and have the conversation and tell them what God has done in your life. That's all it is.
Yeah.
You know, it's the bearing witness to a testimony to what God has done in your life. And Dave does it well, and I think helped me certainly put to words what I think we should all be able to do, which is just tell our story.
yeah, well, he tells his story beautifully in all those different venues, you know. I mean,
All kinds of places. Yeah, Dave Biser pops up. You think, well, there he is again in a different costume,
Right.
reading the Declaration of Independence. We went and heard him, my kids and I, on the 4th of July. And there's nothing like it, hearing the words of the Declaration of Independence read aloud, because it sounds kind of urgent.
Yeah.
You know, like these words actually matter.
Yeah.
And the king might not like this.
Right,
You know,
right.
so it's good stuff.
Yeah. Well, special thanks to Pastor Dave Biser. What a refreshing, honest conversation about the way God directs and redirects our path in life. If you're struggling with the idea of believing or trusting God, Dave's church, Crosspoint Church, is a wonderful, welcoming community ready to answer your questions about a relationship with God. And finally, please don't forget to drop me a line in the comment box at joewatkins.org. It's such an encouragement to me and our wonderful team. Download the free Lighthouse TV app to watch and share this program anytime. From America's very first capital, Philadelphia, I'm Joe Watkins. For Jeff and the entire team behind the cameras at Lighthouse TV, thanks for watching. God willing, I'll see you next time. Yeah, Dave Biser.
Another cool guy.
I would love to see him read the Declaration of Independence.
Would you like to have his hair? I'd like to have his hair.
Yeah.
I mean, he's got such a joyful way of talking about serious things, even talking about his work with Veterans Court, which is such an important. And I've got obviously a buddy in the Veterans Court who's gotten to
Joe Watkins' State of Independence is a production of Lighthouse TV, positively different. Made possible in part because of the support of viewers like you.